Hi again, hand readers. Today's topic is bent water fingers or bent Jupiter fingers in the palmistry system. I'm personally trained in the 5-element system of how to read hands, thus the reference to water element. My name is Jennifer. I'm based in Johannesburg. I've been reading hands and teaching and writing about palmistry and chirology for very many years. Please contact me if you're interested in studying with me or having a reading with me. In the 5-element system, we ascribe an element to each of the 5 digits, and we ascribe them in order of size. So the largest finger is Earth, and that corresponds to the most dense element, obviously Earth. Second largest is generally the water finger, that's the index finger, and that's because water vibrates at a slightly more rapid frequency than does Earth, but at a slower frequency than does fire. So therefore, in order of size of fingers, we go Earth as the middle finger, which is cultural identity. I spoke about that in the last 2 videos. Water comes next, which is the finger of personal identity. The ring finger, which is the fire finger, is the finger of extra personal identity. Air finger, baby finger, the finger of impersonal identity. And our thumb represents chi, or the spirit principle, the ether principle, the God principle, essentially. The various shapes, sizes, lengths, thicknesses, and so on of each individual digit are in the 5-element system interpreted according to the principles of the element that is ascribed to that individual finger or digit. In the 5-element system, the Jupiter or index finger, the water finger, relates to self-image. How do we see ourselves? What is the extent of our self-esteem, our sense of self-worth? The innate qualities of our self-worth are divulged by the various shapes and forms of this finger. And bent water fingers, obviously, as I've kind of touched on already, are depicting or reflecting that there's something bent, there's something askew, there's something awry in terms of the person's inner sense of self-worth. Whereas when they're harmoniously formed, then we've got a more likely characteristics of self-confidence, of self-esteem, and the quality of perseverance, which is one of the primary principles of water. If you look at what water does in nature, water is scientifically the strongest element. It gets what it wants. Water will destroy anything in time, as I often say, and therefore people with very harmoniously formed water fingers are more likely to get what they want in life. Of course, this will clearly have to be cross-referenced to many other palmar features. Water fingers too relate to some extent to personal philosophy, to religious inclinations and orientations. And what might it show when the finger curves, when it bends inward towards the adjoining earth finger, the Saturn finger, the finger of cultural identity? Well, the bend really, especially and specifically if the finger is thin, and especially if the finger is also short, and that is that it will add to a critical faculty within. It weakens self-confidence and self-esteem. The person suffers from deep-seated hurt. They may experience a sense of being done in by life, as if life has done this to me. So there may be some victim consciousness that needs to be overcome in the ideal. In essence, they struggle to feel good enough. And of course, there'll be reasons for this that might go back to perhaps domineering parents. Some systems speak about domineering same-sex parents. Others just say generally a domineering parent. Hard to unravel that exactly. I think that would be at the discretion of the reader and perhaps bringing in his or her intuition to establish what happened in that person's childhood that affected their self-esteem, their sense of not being good enough so acutely. In my understanding, because sensitivity is one of the qualities or characteristics of the water element, that particular person, that child's parents had no idea, no sense of the extent of that child's sensitivity, and therefore the child was hurt, damaged, and wounded. And this leaves them with a call to deep introspection, and on the plus side, you could say that the likelihood of them becoming very empathic listeners, because their own sensitivity will add to, hopefully, a sense of compassion for others. You can be sure that those people with bent water fingers dislike the rat race. They are not competitive, and overt visibility is not to their taste. They prefer to work behind the scenes. Some readers say that this feature marks the collector, somebody who likes to collect material items. In the 5-element system, we see it more as an acquisitive quality that pertains to people. So acquisitive with friendships, as well as having exacting standards. Water always aspires to better. So water element links to idealism, and therefore each person with bent water fingers will have might have very exacting standards that they expect their friends to meet, and then in turn might suffer disillusion and disappointment when those criteria aren't met. Depending on the extent of the owner of bent water fingers' sense of lack of self-worth, the internal wound, they could become very manipulative, or even the opposite, easily manipulated. So there's this play on the concept of manipulation that you might want to bring into your readings if you do come across clients, or if you yourself have this feature to address. A few more ideas that might go with this feature is that the person may have a pull towards traditional faiths, traditional religions, considering that the earth finger represents the cultural background, the tradition. Therefore, that pull towards water-seeking earth, one can perceive, and water-seeking the security of earth might be an orientation towards that which is traditional in life. Another meaning here could be that the person has some difficulties with authority. There are two ways of looking at this, as is often the case. The flip side is always, or often, as relevant. Either they have issues with authority, or they exhibit an innate deference to authority, to those older and wiser. Can go either way depending on very many other hand features. Finding an outward bending water finger is extremely unusual. It's not something I've come across often in all my thousands of hands that I've examined, but I would suggest that when you do find this feature, or if you yourself have this feature, you'd be more outgoing, you'd be more extroverted, you would be an independent seeker, so to speak. In next week's video, I'll share a little bit about thick versus thin fingers. I look forward to chatting with you then. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next week.